Hi folks, Jeff Bridgman here in York County, Pennsylvania. Tonight I want to talk to you about this wonderful Civil War bandmasters staff. I've never owned a Civil War period example before, but before I really show it to you and show why it's so cool, I'd like to talk to you just a little bit about why bands were important to Civil War units during the Civil War. So when the war broke out, people sort of thought it was only going to last a very short time, right? Most regiments were raised for a 3-month term of service. The Union thought it was going to be in and out, one and done, and the South was just going to collapse. Well, that's not exactly what happened, as we all know, as 620,000 people died in the 5-year period that encompassed the Civil War. So when units were first raised and everybody thought this was going to be short, then all manner of money was spent on all sorts of things that might not otherwise have been included in budgets. One of the things was bands. So volunteer units were different than regular army. So regular army, they were authorized to have 24 pieces in an infantry unit, no more than that. But volunteer units, not being regular army, they could have as much as they wanted. And a lot of units were raised by local individuals. They were funded with local money, and they were outfitted thus, by people who were not regular army. And thus it was that every volunteer unit during the opening months of the Civil War in the spring and summer of 1861 had a full brass band. This broadside here, if you look at the bottom of it, you'll see musicians wanted for the band and a big hand in blue pointing at it. Bands were important to a unit for morale. They were really good for morale. Remember, there was no iTunes, there's no Spotify. Yeah. How did you get entertainment and music? This was really the only way. And, during drilling, they would make drilling more palpable because you could, have something to listen to while you were getting ready to go get murdered somewhere the next week. Now, if you see here these Zouave uniforms that the guy is wearing here in this terrific broadside for Manhattan Rifles in New York City, this was very attractive to family members, to friends, and to the soldiers themselves who wanted to look good. I mean, some of them, as they went away, remember, these are kids. These are teenagers and kids going into college. Remember how you were back then? I know how I was. I wanted the greatest car in town if I could have it, right? Everybody wanted to look great to girls, to their peers, to whomever they wished to impress. And a huge brass band, some of these had 50 pieces, was impressive and a little uplifting, right, at a tough time. So if you want to think about just what kind of expense this undertook, think about it this way. There were 4 to 5 regiments in a brigade. There were 3 brigades in a division. There were 3 divisions in a corps. And at the beginning of the war, there was about 15 corps. I think, don't quote me on that exactly, but that's close. At the end of the war, I think there were 26 corps. What that meant is that there were 35 to 40 bands per corps. Now, by the end of, as 1861 starts to close and you get into October, the Army said, this is ridiculous. So they passed U.S. Army General Orders number 91 that said, 1, new infantry regiments will not have bands. And two, any attrition that occurred from the band for whatever reason, those guys wouldn't be replaced. But the funniest part, I think, is that any guys that were in the bands that weren't actually musicians, those guys were out. You know, they're discharged, they're out, give them some other job, they're done. When you got into December of that year, the paymaster's office filed a report that said the savings from eliminating bands projected over the course of a year was going to be about $5 million. Let me tell you, in 1861, $5 million was a ton of money. So at any rate, bands did continue throughout the war, and you know, if you look at the early photographs, they're really quite terrific. I have never owned a Civil War bandmaster's staff. Now look at this. At the end of this, look at the wonderful Federal eagle applied to the finial. This is sort of a flattened mushroom cap finial, you might call it, and there's really nice detailing around there and around here. You see the diagonal ribs. There's a place here and here to attach the cord. This is the original cord. A little bit of fraying, but you'd expect that, right? And all the way down to the bottom where you have these wonderful tassels. But one of the greatest parts of this is look at this wonderful acorn tip at the bottom of the brass cap. Really terrific. I have here a later staff that I've owned for quite a while. Rarely ever have taken out. I just think it's kind of fun to own. So this is a different style of finial, and you can see this type of finial during the war, but it would be more likely to be brass and not white metal. I don't believe that they were making this particular white metal for fittings on staffs at the time. But it's interesting to look at both of these because I like to grab a period image from the web to show you, you know, one of these things actually in use. And so check out this guy here. Most band photos, you can't see the staff really well, if you can even see one at all. But this is a rather big one. And you can see on the top here that he has a ball finial on this staff, which is a pretty tall one. Comes right up to about his chin. Quite similar, really, in nature. So thanks for joining me today for this little talk about Civil War bands and about this wonderful bandmaster staff. If you'd like to acquire it, please give me a call.